So a little bit of housekeeping at the very beginning, just to make sure. Obviously, please feel free to ask questions. We will potentially not get to answering the questions um, during the session, but we will definitely reserve some time at the end for us to then answer any questions that came up. So yeah, please feel free to ask questions throughout the process. Um, Let me kick off with introducing maybe Aylin first. So Aylin, would you mind introducing yourself a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Markus. So yeah, I'm the CTO and one of the co-founders of Runecast. Yeah, we started Runecast back in 2015, and before that, I was working for IBM. I was the tech lead for EMEA, for VMware and Microsoft services in IBM. And prior to that, I was a network engineer in the Romanian army. Yeah, that's pretty much where I will stop with like going back. I'm based in the Czech Republic in Brno, where most of the R&D team is also located. And yeah, that's pretty much all. It's snowy and nice here, so yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Aylin. I was hoping we go back to preschool and kindergarten, but that's okay. We can keep it there.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit about myself. My name is Markus Strauss. I'm the head of product management. I joined Runecast very early this year, so I'm dangerously close to my 1 year anniversary at this point. And as the name says, I'm responsible for anything product related. Before Runecast, I spent quite a lot of time in the security and monitoring space. That's pretty much where I've spent the past 15 years of my career across multiple different companies, Symantec, Trend Micro, and a bunch of others. And yeah, been with Runecast since early this year, and it's been really an exciting year, and there's much more to come. So yeah, really looking forward for the next kind of 45 to 50 minutes together with you, Aylin, and together with all of you, right? So, when we're at this time of the year now, right? And I'm gonna be careful, try not to sound like one of those TV shows that tend to show up at the end of the year with the year review, but we are at this time of the year. So, as a CTO of a IT security company, you obviously have a very unique insight into what's going on in the industry. How would you see the past year? What are some of the key things that maybe stood out to you, right? That all of us somehow affect, right?
Yeah, it's been quite an interesting year, quite exciting year for us here at Runecast. And yeah, as a CTO of a IT security company, especially an IT security, like cybersecurity company that started with roots in VMware in a niche area. So I'm pretty sure that many, especially in the VMware community, know us as the cool guys predicting the future based on KB articles. So yeah, we over the years we increased the capabilities of Runecast as a platform and really became security and compliance platform. And I think it's been like, especially since end of 2021, when we dealt with all the Log4j craziness, that we confirmed our place in this space, in the cybersecurity space, and we understand also the value and responsibility we have. So as the CTO of a cybersecurity company, I've been really closely following the developments in this space. And yeah, there's been so much going on. And yeah, just to capture the key highlights, well, actually, I would start with a low light, unfortunately, and that is the war in Ukraine. Yeah, besides all the cybersecurity activity that was sparked by it, even though like international cyber warfare is nothing new, this war now highlighted the importance of having really good cyber defenses, of protecting the critical infrastructure. And I think above all, for me personally, also, it kind of burst a bit the bubble that we felt living in a peaceful and prosper era. So now with post-pandemic and war going on, yeah, that doesn't feel so safe anymore. But besides that, yeah, as we've seen increasingly over the years, there was this trend of increasing cybersecurity attacks. breaches and interruptions, even at national level. So this year, for example, there were the issues in Costa Rica with like key infrastructure having been interrupted, or massive data breaches in Albania as well. Yeah, COVID also, the COVID-driven accelerated digital transformation continued, maybe not at the same pace as in the previous 2 years, but yeah, migrating to clouds brings a lot of benefits, obviously, but it also increases exposure. And yeah, as one of our customers migrating to cloud put it, it's a bit of the Wild West there. So yeah, they are actually quite happy that we are able to cover both their on-prem, where they feel more like secure and confident, but also their new Wild West. And speaking about yeah, Wild West, I think like one of the main reasons for that is that the role of IT engineer, IT manager, or even executives has changed quite a lot. I mean, security has always been an integral part of IT, but in the recent years, it became like much more not only important. Yeah, it's always been important, but it became really quite difficult a job. We've all seen those memes on the internet where you have a really old person and there's a fake LinkedIn profile with a like John, 24 years old cybersecurity expert or something. So yeah, it really takes a toll.
It does, and I think you know, I I think we've never been in a situation where roles amalgamate as much into one as we are right now, right? I mean, if I go back and by the way, I'm only 23. But if I go back 15, 20 years ago when I started in the security space, right, the roles were very much strictly separated. You had infosec teams. Back then, we didn't really even have SOC teams or things like that. You had infosec, and you've had general IT administration and things of that nature. Whereas today, I think all of these roles amalgamate into one, at least in some way, shape, or form, in terms of the fact that we're all responsible for IT security, at least to a degree, right?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, the pressure of knowing that the cyber attacks increased and you are more and more exposed, and you're responsible for not only the IT infrastructure, but ultimately even about like people's lives and privacy. So that's additional pressure that these roles feel.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and lastly, I would say like something very recent now with Chat GPT and the rise of AI. I think it's really exciting for me, like seeing we are not foreigners to AI. We've been using AI quite a lot, but I think Chat GPT now really commoditizes the AI. So there are no more AI scientists. Everyone can be an AI user now, and the use cases that are covered by that can be really game changing. So
yeah. But it also brings home the fact that how important the data science part of AI will become, right? Because now that it's much more mainstream for pretty much anyone to be able to make use of AI and of models that were pre-trained, it now becomes more and more important that these models are trained with the correct data sets, right? Because otherwise, what can be used for good can also be used for bad, right? I mean, that's it's a very interesting time in the AI space right now, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, looking back at this year and all of the things that that we were seeing, and all of the different data breaches that are, quite frankly, not new, right? I mean, this has been, going on for many, many years. What are the key takeaways that you would see, companies need to start thinking about, or, really focus on when we look at, the past year and maybe even beyond that, right?
Yeah. I think one of the key takeaways from this year's attacks and breaches is that, well, nothing beats being on top of your vulnerability assessment and configuration drift management. Those are basic things, but it's still like it's back to basics, because all the additional layers of infrastructure and all the additional layers of security that are added there can be compromised if these basics are not covered properly. So actually, I related to the fact that these breaches are on a national level. I'm also quite happy to see that governments are more involved into this. So the need of cybersecurity became a really a national priority. So we've seen a lot of activity also and involvement from CISA and NIST in the US, BSI in Germany, and CSC in the UK. So yeah, nations also try to help not only govern and enforce, but also help companies and the critical infrastructure to be secure, because yeah, this really became a priority.
Yeah, and it's interesting because as an industry, I think we're all guilty of the shiny new toy syndrome, right? And I think that applies to all of us, whether that's a vendor or from a customer perspective or from a company's perspective, right? I think it's human nature. We always want to have the latest technology, but I think to your point, I absolutely agree. It's one of the chief problems in many of the data breaches that we've seen is the fact that maybe the basics weren't done to the right extent. And I think no matter how much new technology we add on top of these things, if we don't do the basics right, then everything that we add on top is going to be far less impactful and far less useful, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, absolutely.
If you look at the numbers, 2 out of 3 top attack vectors are still old vulnerabilities and security misconfiguration caused by human errors.
Yeah, no, definitely. And this is not new, right? And most of our audience will likely know that too, right? But it's just something that's so fundamentally important to continuously ensure that despite all of the additional technology, which is great, right? All new technology that we can put in the hands of customers or put in the hands of organizations to help secure their environments is right. It's the right step. It's the right thing, right?
Yeah.
But equally important is to ensure that the basis, the foundation of your security strategy is not based on new technology, but based on good best practices, based on good security hygiene. And that always includes vulnerability assessment, configuration drift management, and just knowing where things are and what's there, right? So yeah, absolutely. What do you think, some of the lessons might be that, we can learn outside from just the, go back to basics, right?
Yeah, it's also about efficiency and the increasing complexity of the tech stacks. So you have new stuff like Kubernetes, you have the transition or migration to cloud that I mentioned earlier. You still have the on-prem environments with their complexities and all the apps and all the different layers. So trying to do security in an efficient manner, it's actually quite difficult. And yeah, what we observed is that many organizations use different types of infrastructure and cloud services and different types of security software or offerings and services to cover bits and pieces of that. So I think it's also really important to try to have a holistic view over security across all these environments, the on-prem, the cloud, the in-between as well. So yeah, I think this is really important, and I think we're looking at some data, and yeah, the average enterprise has 10 plus security tools, and yeah, each of those is a great fit for their respective use case, but trying to manage and oversee that from holistic security point of view, it's actually extremely difficult.
Yeah, and that's again, it's something that was born out of the need of requiring a solution for a particular problem. But what's widely known as tool sprawl is not new either, right? This is something that's been going on for a long time. I do think last year or this year and last year maybe there was a finer point on that, in the sense of we've seen, at least from companies that I've spoken to, and I'm sure you've spoken to as well, is that the need for consolidating some of these tools has certainly grown, and it's certainly something that I've been hearing a lot more when speaking to companies or to analysts or to others in the market, where, to your point, the average 10 plus security solution deployment is just no longer really efficient. And there's this age-old kind of tug of war between security and, it used to be between security and usability, right? Way back in the day, we used to always kind of weigh those two things off against each other. Do we want to have users to use two-factor authentication and things like that, because it's yet another step? Today, I think this is more around security and efficiency, right? And those two things can, by all means, go hand in hand, right? With the right approaches, to your point, right? So consolidating some of this will drive efficiency, and not only being more efficient in terms of the efficacy of things that you can find in the environment, but also efficiency in terms of just pure manpower and man hours that are required, right, to keep everything secure. So absolutely, yeah.
Exactly.
Perfect. Yeah. So, I mean, and you've touched on AI a little bit. What do you think AI, and what role will it play, right? I mean, we all look always at automation, automate everything, right? Automate all the things. And it's fantastic because it allows customers to, do much more with less, right? But what do you think the role of AI is going to be in the future, right? Especially in the cybersecurity space.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's a really interesting topic, and I think we'll need a few hours to talk around this a lot. Yeah, the easy answer is it's always it depends, and I think at this point the answer is more like we don't know exactly, especially with the commoditization of AI that was brought by ChatGPT. I think that will be quite interesting to see and to keep track of, and being like actively involved in that, of course, as well. I think from just like looking back for the cybersecurity, AI, and especially combined with machine learning, have brought like really tremendous changes from both sides. So we used AI for a while now, and it was really key in building automated security systems, natural language processing and understanding, and automatic threat detection. But it started to be used more and more also to develop smart malware and different attacks to bypass the latest security protocols. Yeah, AI has been already a central piece of cybersecurity for a while.
Yep.
But I think at least it's clear that moving forward, any AI-enabled solution and proactive discovery of these like potential security gaps and vulnerabilities will be really crucial when facing the AI-driven cyber attacks, because it's really humanly impossible to face this type of attacks and modern cyber criminals and cyber AI bots in old-fashioned way. So yeah, only the organizations that will leverage automation and AI-powered solutions will be one step ahead of the game here. So yeah, with ChatGPT, sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, probably you can see the excitement of my face on I talk about ChatGPT. It's really interesting because I've been using OpenAI for a while now. We're like having the different models used internally, but I think now with ChatGPT, it became really a crucial moment in history. I would compare it even to like the first personal computer. So now everyone can be a user of AI, and yeah, while I was playing myself with different use cases and it helped me script some things, it's really good. It still has a way to go for really complex things, like complex development scenarios or creating solutions, but it's the first step. It came so suddenly, and it already provides a really good value. But what's also a bit concerning for the future is that it's so easy now to write malware. Just like look at some of the vulnerabilities. If you especially have the basics of the if you're even a novice hacker, now with ChatGPT, actually you can cause some damage and like create exploits for known vulnerabilities that are out there, and yeah, that will increase a lot the attacks for next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just it lowered the bar of entry yet again, right? I mean, again, I'm going back to, and it's a sign of my age, I guess, but I'm going back to 15, 20 years ago where, hacking really was still a fine art, right? In terms of you had to be knowledgeable and you had to understand and you had to be able to write code. And then there was a phase of what we used to call script kiddies, right? Where all you needed to be able to do is do a little bit of scripting and a lot of copy and paste. And then we moved into the phase of, well, all you needed to do was open your wallet because, we had the dark web and we still do, and you were able to acquire, you know, scripts and exploits fairly readily. And now we're even one step further than that because with the use of an AI-driven tool like ChatGPT, you don't even have to open your wallet anymore, right? You know a few things, and you can start being very dangerous, right? And to your point, if you add this together with the cybersecurity skills shortage that the industry has been talking about for, God, at least the last 5 or 6 years, you have a pretty good recipe for some real damage, right? And it becomes so incredibly important to start looking at how you counteract that with automated ways, because to your point, it's humanly impossible to defend against these attacks on that scale, right?
Exactly.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, definitely interesting times ahead, right? So let's switch gear a little bit and let's maybe talk a little bit about the things that you know Runecast has done over 2022, right? Maybe some of the key areas that we've spent time on, some of the key areas that we um, wanted to bring value back to our customers. Maybe you want to kick it off, and I'll do one.
Yeah, sure. I think it ties back to one of the challenges we talked about earlier, enabling organizations to have a holistic view of their overall security posture. I think this is really important challenge, and I think we at Runecast, we are now well equipped to deal with this, because yeah, with Runecast we can actually cover really the key parts of the infrastructure. And together with the efficient IT operations management and advanced security, and also adding vulnerability management for environments of any type, from on-prem through the cloud and hybrid, that's especially valuable for large organizations, and not only, yeah, especially in environments where there is high complexity and they are dispersed. So
Mm.
I think this is really important. And yeah, besides the holistic view, we also try to cover also horizontally. So stuff that we added with container image scanning and shift left security. That's also important because not only we need to look at the environments, but we also need to look at different stages of application development and infrastructure setup. So trying to cover security from the left side, from the entry point, also
Yeah,
really.
no, absolutely. I mean, if we use a rolling 12 months, and I'm being a little creative here, but if we're using a rolling 12 months rather than just simply 2022, I mean, if we think back this time last year or around this time last year, plus minus a few weeks, um, we didn't even have operating system support, right?
Yeah.
So between that time and now, we went from being able to do the hyperscalers, so that's VMware and Azure and AWS, to now being able to help customers do VMware, Azure, AWS, GCP, operating systems, not just Kubernetes as a cluster, but Kubernetes as a workload. Be able to do image scanning on the fly, be able to do image scanning via policies, and be able to integrate into the CI/CD pipeline, into the deployment process, and really ensure that the workload that gets deployed complies to the security standards set by the company, right? So
Yeah.
we started the year out still very much on the hyperscaler level and have extended all of our capabilities throughout the year into the actual workload, the piece that requires the most attention, right? Because it's the most changeable, right? The workload element is always the one that has the highest risk and the most change, because we always spin up new things, whether that's VMs, whether that's new databases. We spin up new container images. We deploy new EC2 instances. All of these things are, they're not ephemeral in their nature, but they're much shorter lived than the entire infrastructure, right? So yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I look at this overall from a 12-month period, we've come a long way in providing customers the ability to do this holistic view of the environment. And to your point in terms of the complexity of the tech stack, technology is additive, right? And it's something that we keep forgetting, or we have a tendency of forgetting, is just because we're moving a workload from on-prem to let's say a public cloud, that does not necessarily equate to a 1 minus 1. It generally equates to a 1 plus 1, right? Because you don't get rid of the existing technology, at least not immediately, right? So as companies go through this process of migrating workloads into either cloud or into containerized workloads, their existing workloads generally still exist, and so all you do is you add things onto the stack, and it just makes it so much more difficult to monitor. For example, even on the hyperscaler side, or when we look at VMware, right? I mean, it's just now in the last release where we've added the user tracking for configuration changes, right? So and I think you would likely agree that it's a really important aspect for any sort of monitoring of, whether that's from a troubleshooting perspective or from a security perspective, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Who has made that change, right?
Yeah.
That's really, really important.
And we still predict the future using KV articles, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
that part as well. And yeah, you're right that being able to see not only what's changed, we are covering that already with the config vault functionality, but now also being able to see who changed it and when those changes happened. That's really important. And yeah, it's also a key requirement from different regulatory compliance point because yeah, like different profiles do require this kind of tracking.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. And I think and you've mentioned the governmental kind of connection to a lot of the push in the security space, which is very welcomed. And I for my part think there needs to be a higher regulatory involvement in ensuring that we have all of the right standards, and that we look after the security of our environments, right? But one of the other things that we've introduced, and we were one of the first vendors who managed to integrate with that, was CSAR's known exploited vulnerability database, right? So from a customer perspective, again, Runecast is always trying to ensure that we surface the information to you when you need it, right? And non-exploited vulnerability database integration is something that's incredibly powerful in terms of ensuring that you can spend the right time at the right moment with the right thing, right? We all understand there's somewhere around 180,000 CVEs in existence, and yes, there is a scoring system, the CVSS score, that is designed to help understand what the criticality of the vulnerability is. But I often use the term, a lot of these are academical, right? In terms of, you can exploit them, yes, but you have to be in front of the server, provide a handstand, and type with your right foot. The vulnerability is still exploitable, and it might have a very high CVSS score, but it doesn't require necessarily your immediate attention, right? So by integrating with CSAR's non-exploited vulnerabilities database, what we've given customers is the ability to say, okay, has this vulnerability actually successfully been exploited somewhere out in the wild? And if yes, that's another indicator of prioritization, right? Because that immediately means, okay, these vulnerabilities I must take care of now. and everything else I can do after that, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Definitely.
And for like, I think for the US federal agencies, it's even an executive order to actually
Yep.
take care of these vulnerabilities and prioritize and mitigate them. There is even like a due date that we also cover as part of the metadata of the vulnerability, where you have the due date by when you need to have this mitigated.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And you know, I mean, as we're I think as we're moving into 2023 and beyond, um, I would assume we're going to see more and more regulatory requirements in terms of
Yeah.
technologies that need to be covered, standards that need to be fulfilled. Um, and it's definitely something that has been increasing over the last number of years. That's for certain. We've touched on Kubernetes a little bit. You know, like Kubernetes is one of those new technologies. In air quotes, right? Because you know, for most people who are a little bit technically um, inclined and like to play around with things, you know, containerized workloads have been around for a while. But in terms of mainstream deployment, Kubernetes or largely containerized deployments are still relatively new. What are some of the things that you see us spending time on next year as it pertains to containerized workloads?
Yeah, Kubernetes is is really interesting, and you can easily see on social media lots of memes around the struggles of engineers to operate, deploy, or secure
Mm,
Kubernetes. Yeah, it provides like so much flexibility, but it also comes at a really high complexity level. So especially for IT engineers who are kind of pushed into having to cover Kubernetes, that's really difficult. For the ones that are more excited about that and have had the time to play around with it
mm,
and keep up with everything that's new, it's actually extremely exciting. And I remember when we went to KubeCon, and seeing lots of the young developers and DevOps engineers being so familiar not only with Kubernetes itself, but with all the components from the ecosystem, from the like the Linux Foundation and the CNCF, with all the solutions that, you know, at some point you look at it and you're wondering, is it Pokemons or is it container related solutions? So yeah, it's really interesting, fast-moving space where being able to have an automated security solution that is able to look at the whole stack, look at the security from the nodes point of view, the container point of view, trying also to shift left the security scanning aspect of it
mm,
is really important. So what we've done until now with covering CIS benchmarks, for example, for Kubernetes, and we just released a few days ago another module that goes even deeper at the node level. So we now cover completely the CIS benchmarks for Kubernetes, and as I mentioned, we also have the image scanning capabilities. We offer on top of that an admission controller as well, so you can automate actually the workload admission to the cluster using Runecast Analyzer image scanning. And yeah, best practices for that. We also now introduced, as you mentioned, yeah, the governments are also helping. I would avoid using the term like governing, but yeah, they're helping actually with
yep.
providing some guidelines actually. So yeah, we have the BSI standard for containerized workloads from Germany, and also the CISA Kubernetes hardening guide that we also implemented and have in the product in the latest release.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And containerized workloads are just going to increase, right? I mean, it's I think this is at this point relatively certain that more and more organizations are going to start using containerized workloads. And to be honest, I can't blame them, right? I mean, the flexibility containerized deployments allow for is just not easily doable with other deployment methods, right? I mean, the speed of which you can scale deployment and the ease of, the use of the baked images is unparalleled. The problem is it also obviously brings risks, right? Because of the fact that these are baked images and whatever is ready-made, you kind of have to live with, or you have to replace it. You can't easily make changes to an existing image, right?
And
But
that's why,
yeah,
despite the complexity of Kubernetes, we see
yep,
increased adoption mainly because of all these benefits. So
yep.
it's not easy to work with, but it's not easy to live without it. So
Yeah, understandably. So you've touched already on some of the things that we've just released, and I'm just going to go through a little bit the rest of what we've just released in this last release, because that's also our last large release for this year. So you've mentioned already the advanced Kubernetes analysis and the CISA Kubernetes hardening profile. So again, from a Kubernetes perspective, that is really, really important because it rounds out the abilities that we can do in a containerized workload scenario. So again, meaning we can provide customers a fully fledged container security solution, right? And that's something that I think we all can be looking forward to be able to expand further, right, into next year. But we've also added some other areas, especially in the security space. For example, we've added KVKK for vSphere, right? So that's the Turkish equivalent of the of GDPR, right? Again, really important for our local customers in around Turkey. We spent quite a lot of time on adding NIST controls for operating system, right? So now customers can do NIST compliance scanning against Windows Server and Linux, right? Again, going back to the holistic view of the environment, right? And for the audience, you start noticing this is a theme, right? We're trying to provide our customers the ability to have this holistic view of the environment, whereby you as a customer are able to use the same standards irrespective of technology, right? So really technology agnostic in the sense of if you have to be NIST compliant, then clearly you don't only have to be NIST compliant on vSphere, right? You have to be NIST compliant in all technologies, and we're really spending a lot of time in ensuring that our customers have the ability to do this, right? On the IT operations side of the house, because that is still the baseline, the foundation of most organizations, is the infrastructure and ensuring that they run smoothly. We've made quite a number of changes in terms of the abilities that customers can see in Runecast. We touched on the user tracking in the configuration vault, or in the configuration drift management. We've also added things like best practices for PowerShell, right? So because we understand PowerShell is pardon the pun, very powerful, but it's used very widely, but it can also be very dangerous, right? If not implemented right, both from a potential of bringing systems down to the potential of gaining access to things that you should not have, right? And the list goes on and on. We have a lot of things that we've added in our latest release, but those are probably the biggest ticket items, right? One thing, and I'm a little bit conscious of time, the one area that I really wanted a little bit to talk to you about, Aylin, is and what are our plans for next year? What are some of the key areas that you think Runecast as a company will spend time on? What are some of the key areas where we feel we can provide most value back to our customers?
Yeah, I think there's a lot on our roadmap. Actually, a lot of exciting new things, but also we'll be still, as we discussed, about the importance of going back to basics. So yeah, the vulnerability assessment, vulnerability management will add new flexibility, new capabilities around that. As we discussed about correlating the CISA known exploited vulnerabilities. So we'll try to enrich as much as possible the metadata that we have there around vulnerabilities, looking on the dark web, looking on the internet, looking at exploits that are actively used, and looking even on social media about like which CVs are trending, what is really important, just to again to clear up the noise a bit, because again there will be lots and lots of new 0 days, new vulnerabilities, old vulnerabilities unpatched. There will be a lot of red on the dashboards of,
Yep.
of the IT security solutions. So yeah, we'll try to help prioritize more those things. So yeah, that's like one of the most important things. But on top of that, we're planning some really cool features for next year. So I think the cloud infrastructure entitlement management, this is a part that we already covered. For the hyperscalers, we do look at like entitlement management. We have best practices around it, but we'll want to continue in the same path as we added now the config vault, where we can see who did those changes. So we'll try to link it more to the event data and looking even deeper, trying to identify the overprivileged accounts and so on. We'll also focus on providing agentless vulnerability assessments. I think that will be also really important, especially in the cloud environments where, as you mentioned earlier, yeah, the workloads there are not ephemeral, but they are quite short-lived, and yeah, you normally don't have enough time to include them in asset management databases, and it needs to be more automated. And yeah, we're also preparing a SaaS version of Runecast Analyzer. Yeah, this is something that will help with some use cases. Currently, you know, Runecast is an on-prem fully secure solution, but we are also working on having a SaaS version of it. And yeah, what else? I would also mention the attack path analysis. So we are covering vulnerability assessments and so on, but with all the new capabilities I mentioned that we'll be adding, yeah, we'll also provide an attack path analysis offering as well.
Yeah, I mean, those are all really, really important areas to, again, bring this holistic view into your IT security and the infrastructure around it. And I would add one area I think that we also will be spending time in, and that's the area in terms of steps post Runecast, right? So what happens with the information once Runecast has discovered, right? So meaning, you know, most companies require something to happen after, for example, a vulnerability has been identified or a configuration has been changed and things like that. So we will be spending some time in understanding what are these next steps, what, for example, patch management solutions and things like that customers are using, and how we can help in bringing these processes together, again, to help with automating a lot of these steps to ensure that the really valuable people, right, that work within customers' environments can spend their time on the really critical or business driving things, rather than having to spend their time with you know, potentially ticket creations and things like that, right? And we're getting dangerously close on the time, right? But just to recap, I think from an importance perspective for 2023, really it's back to basics, right? Ensuring that you know what's there, you know what you've got, you know that it's covered, you know that you don't have vulnerabilities, and you know what you need to do if you do, right? And I think the second area definitely is the consolidation, right? Really thinking about how to achieve more with less, right? And that's not necessarily just in the commercial aspect, but also in the manpower space, right? So how can you achieve more with less, right? With less tools, with less individual solutions, with less individual bits and pieces that are used inside the environment. Absolutely. Any parting words from Aylin before we open up for questions?
Yeah, that's it's really exciting. Yeah, all these things that we discussed are extremely exciting. I can't wait for next year. I'm really happy that we're wrapping up this year. I think on a high. So yeah, it's been a good year. Let's hope the next one will be better from some points of view. Yeah, don't want to go again into the low light that I started with. So
No, I can only echo this, right? I mean, given this was my first year. I have to say it was a very successful year. It was a very exciting year. There was much work been done by the teams, and we've provided a lot of really interesting value back to companies and to our customers. And I'm really looking forward to next year, to all of the things that we're planning on doing for next year, and to see how we can help customers even further, right? And with that, excuse me. With that, let's open up for questions. Let's see. We've got Zuzka on the panel with us, part of our marketing team, to help us look at the chat a little bit, because it's a little bit difficult. So let's see. Please all feel free to ask questions. We're happy to field them.
We have one question from Jan asking regarding the Hyper-V support in Runecast, and if that's going to be there anytime soon.
It will it will likely be there. I'm going to put on my product hat here for a minute. Can't give exact timelines right now. There are a lot of things involved in that, but we have looked at it. It is part of our backlog. So it's something that we know we will want to do at some point. Whether it will happen very soon or a little bit later, I honestly don't know yet, and I don't really want to kind of put statements out around time and then have to backtrack on that. But absolutely happy to have a conversation offline as well on some of the requirements and things like that. Great question, though.
We have another one from Matthias. How will partners be able to connect to the upcoming SaaS solution?
Right. Aylin, if you want, I can take this. So it will work very, very similar to what you're used to today, in the sense that I managed to deploy our alpha or pre-alpha very, very recently, a couple of days ago, and it's Runecast the way you understand it and know it. The interface and even the technology, by and large, is the same, apart from the fact that we've broken some of the things into microservices and we deploy it into an AWS region. When it goes live, it will be into an AWS region of your choice, right? Depends on where you locate it, because we do understand data sovereignty is a very, very important part of this. And then you will be logging into the console via a URL, right? So that'll be specific URL for you for your deployment. And that's where you log in and use Runecast the exact same way as you did before. I hope that answers the question.
I hope that answers the question as well. At this point, we don't have any further questions.
Perfect. And we're literally, I think, on the minute or one.
Sorry, another one. We just
absolutely. Absolutely.
With the increasing functionality of Runecast, are there any plans to have the sort of option for RBAC for different users, like for instance, only Kubernetes compliance for the container DevSecOps team, BSI, GDPR for the CISO, and so on?
Absolutely. RBAC is something that we've been looking at for quite some time. We've implemented parts, right? Earlier this year, we introduced something called organizations, which is effectively giving customers the ability to create teams within Runecast, right? That you can assign specific connections to. So, for example, specific vSphere connection, or, some operating systems. And that organization has 2 additional roles that we didn't have before. But again, this is only the beginning in terms of rudimentary RBAC. We are looking at expanding RBAC capabilities more into similar to what you've described, either by technologies or by profiles or similar kind of mix match type of scenarios. Definitely something that's on the roadmap and we're looking at. Perfect.
Robert says cheers, and we have no further questions at the moment.
Perfect. Well, let me give some closing remarks. Thank you everyone for joining. I hope it was interesting. I hope it was informative. I really enjoyed our chat, and I hope there was something in it for you. I wish anyone who's celebrating really good break over the festive holidays. Anyone who's not celebrating, please don't work too hard. And I'm looking forward to certainly seeing you, or at least virtually seeing you all again at some point early next year. Until then, thank you very much, and have a great new year.